And the best way to see this is in the action of what they did. Let me give you a better understanding of how they screwed, excuse my expression, God's laws all up and made it a problem for man. The Jewish legalistics had a passion for definitions. So they asked concerning the fourth commandment, when it said, thou shalt do no work, what is work? Just what is work? Even today we look at that commandment and ask, just what is works? What is classified as works when that commandment says, thou shalt do no work on the Sabbath day? You know what the Jews did? And this is why Christ got so angry with them, with the Pharisees and the scribes, because of what they did to the people. The Jews, for example, said, the scribes, to carry a burden on the Sabbath day is work. But what is a burden? A burden had to be defined. So the scribal law lays it down that a burden is food equal in weight to a dried fig, enough wine for mixing in a gobble, milk enough for one swallow, that's work, honey enough to put on a wound, oil enough to anoint a small member, water enough to moisten an eye, paper enough to write a custom house notice upon it. That's work. And you know, that was really going a little bit too far. That's why Christ was angry with the scribes and the Pharisees, putting that kind of burden upon his people when it comes to the law. And that's what most people today don't understand what he said when he said it. Ink enough, I want you to get this, to write the letter of the alphabet. Read enough to make a pen, and so on and so on. My brother and sister, Yeshua, Jesus Christ, was not going to stand any longer for his people to be burdened by such nonsense when it came to his commandment and his laws and the burden that was placed upon him. Also, during those days, the Jews would spend endless hours arguing whether a man could or could not lift a lamp from one place to another on the Sabbath day. Whether a teller committed a sin if he went out with a needle in his robe. Whether a woman might wear a brooch or false hair. All this was written down as a law. Even if a man may go out on the Sabbath with false teeth or an artificial limb. If a man might lift his child on the Sabbath day. Now how confining and how, I mean, in no way in the world that could make sense. And this is what displeased God. My brothers and sisters, I mean, it was hundreds. I could go on and on and on about these silly laws that the Jews placed upon men concerning God's Sabbath day. There was no such thing. If our church leader, my brothers and sisters, and this is the problem today, we just take a little time and to research and to study, they could recognize that all this was from Satan. All this was Satan placed upon man, and there was no way that a man could keep the law under those circumstances. And this is not what Christ intended for his laws to look like. This had nothing to do with the 10 commandments of the Sabbath laws. And this is why Christ said what he said. When he said, I came not to abolish, but to fulfill, to give you an understanding of what I really meant and how the Jews had screwed it up. Writing an alphabet. I mean, there were just so many things that they did in the way they did it. You couldn't write with red ink, with fruit juice. There were just so many typical passages, from the scribal law that just didn't make sense. And the Orthodox Jews regarded as true religion. They really believed this, and it wasn't from God. It was what they interpreted, what they wanted to interpret as part of God's law. To heal was to work on the Sabbath. And Christ, remember, denied that, or disobeyed that, and that's why they did what they did to him. It was really ridiculous as to how and what they placed upon God's people. Now, there were not the laws, these were not the laws of God, as we know, but the laws and regulations is written and worked out by the scribes. The Pharisees also, whose name mean the separate ones, were the men who had separated themselves from the original of the ordinary activities of life to keep all these rules and regulations. Now, we can see the length to which this went from the following facts. For many generations, the scribal law was never written down. It was all oral. It was all word to mouth. It was handed down in the memories of generations and generations of scribes. And in the middle of the 3rd century A.D., a summary of it was made and written down. That summary is known as the Mishnah. It contains 63 tracts on various subjects of the law. And in English, it makes a book of almost 800 pages of these little idiosyncrasies concerning the laws of God. And later, Jewish scholars made commentaries to explain the Mishnah. These commentaries were known as the Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud. These are 12 printed volumes, and of the Babylonian Talmud, there are 60 printed volumes. To the strict Orthodox Jew, in the time of Christ, religion, serving God, was a matter of keeping thousands of logicalistic rules and regulations. There was all type of rules and regulations of do's and don'ts. They, my brothers and sisters, regarded these petty rules and regulations as literal matters of life and death and eternal destiny. Clearly, if we look at this thing closely, Christ did not mean that not one of these rules and regulations was to pass away. If you know your Bible, and this is the thing, you must read your Bible, you'll know that God, Christ, repeatedly broke down all of the rules and the regulations himself and did not obey not one of them. Christ was radical when it came to all these things that the Jews did, and that's why they disliked him. That's why they hated him. That's why they wanted to kill him. Because he did not conform to their way of doing things. What did Christ mean by the law? What did he mean by the law? He said that